Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Sirhan on X on this 24th of November 2025, as it is Thanksgiving week. Of all the turkey, all the food you can eat. Hope everyone had themselves a wonderful day and weekend today. Hope everyone's getting ready for the holiday in the States for Thanksgiving coming up. I'm more than ready. I'm ready to get this day going. Got a nice mini vacation coming up. Get to do all the cooking, get to do all the food setting, get to do all the eating, and get all the football watching that's going to take place Thursday. And boy, I'm going to have the time of my life. I might come back next week, about 50, 60 pounds heavier, but I don't care. I'm just going to enjoy the holiday. I'm getting set up starting tomorrow, going through the next 3 to 4 days. Hope everyone's going to be doing the same thing. Hope everyone's going to be prepared for it. Hope everyone had themselves a wonderful day and 3 day weekend. Happy Victory Monday to those who celebrate today with for your teams winning in the NFL. And of course, the Houston Texans, who got themselves a big win over Buffalo Thursday night. I'll get into the NFL. I'll talk about some wild controversies that took place in the social media apps over the last few days, including today on a baloney apology, a quit job in Cincinnati, and the the pretty and the ugly on this day in boxing history. And one was the prettiest of prettiest, and the other one is the ugliest of ugliest. I'll get that to the end. Of course, Week 12 recap. Touch on the games. As I said before, the big win by the Houston Texans Thursday night over Buffalo. D'Amico Ryan just put his imprint on the defense, and it showed. 2 sacks by Daniil Hunter, and they just made life terrible for Josh Allen. This despite a 100-yard game by James Cook. Makes you wonder if they should reconsider that trade offer for Jalen Waddle from Miami. Remember, they offered a 2027 first round pick. Miami countered and said, I need a 2026 first round pick because we know Miami was doing a fire sale and Buffalo refused to budge. Maybe they should have gone ahead and done that because they needed a wide receiver to help out the balance the offense in Buffalo. Because now in the past few weeks, Josh Allen, a standout quarterback as he is, has gone a little bit back to the turnover machine, and he deserves better than what the Bills organization and the coaching staff have given him because the supporting cast around him hasn't been all that great. And that's why they are in a wild card spot and not leading the AFC East like they normally do. Now, of course, part of it is New England, which I'll touch on later. But Houston is a player in the AFC playoff wildcard hunt. And as long as you have that defense, you're always going to have a chance. The Davis Mills legacy game. And right now, they're in the middle of the playoff hunt. 2 interceptions by Kalen Bullock, who, along with Derek Stingley, has one of the better secondaries in the Texans defense. Don't know if they're going to wind up making the playoffs, but they're in it. They're going to be in a dogfight, and that defense is going to give them a chance against anybody they play. So kudos to the Houston Texans. Bills eventually will be fine. They'll make the playoffs, but probably start to see the chances to win the division start to dwindle just a pinch. I'll touch on the New England aspect here in a minute. Now we go to the Sunday games. I'm just going to pick just a few of them here, the ones that had the playoff implications. Of course, it was the Bears over the Steelers. Mason Rudolph played. Didn't necessarily, he didn't play bad, but he didn't play great either because he had 2 turnovers, which led to 14 points. That's the difference. Of course, Aaron Rodgers didn't play. Caleb Williams didn't play all that great, but odd play calling and decision making by the Steelers coaching staff in this game. A couple of times where they should have gone for it when they didn't, and a couple of other times they shouldn't have gone for it when they did. Just an odd game all around for the Steelers, but a big win for Chicago. Another game where they just find ways to win, and you're starting to see the culture shift in Chicago with their new head coach Ben Johnson. Caleb Williams, still the jury's still out long term, but Ben Johnson's at least made him a respectable quarterback at least this season. Right now, they're sitting at top of the NFC North, which is supposed to be one of the tougher divisions, and they're sitting at top. You got to give them credit. And speaking of the team that's competing with the Steelers for the AFC North, it is the Baltimore Ravens. Another case of just getting W's, and that's what they did against the Jets because the Jets competed. I figured they would, but Baltimore just had a bit too much firepower. Derrick Henry turned back the clock, and they just got the win. Of course, we know what's coming up Thursday night. I'll touch on that later this week. But they got the win. They sit atop of the AFC North, same record, but the Ravens have a better division record, still undefeated, haven't swept the Browns. But Baltimore, they're back in first place after a 1-5 start. That's how they drew it up. Let's just leave it at that. From 1-5 to lead the division, that's how it was drawn up from the beginning. That's how it was scripted, or whatever you want to call it. But they're up there. They're doing something right to get back in the first place. And they're going to probably collect some more wins here because the schedule is favorable, with the exception maybe of the 2 games against Pittsburgh and a home tilt against New England, which is going to be a pretty darn good one. But they're winning. And as long as they keep winning, they're going to be fine. They're probably going to get enough wins to take the division from Pittsburgh at the rate they're going. So that's AFC North talk. Go back to the NFC North. It was the Lions weirdly needing overtime to beat the New York Giants. And the Jameis Winston experience was all over the place. But that's why the Jameis Winston experience is what it is. I mean, he looked good, got the receiving touchdown early in the game with a nice fade route that he got, and the touchdown dance on top of it. But the Giants just found a way to keep going and going. Jahmyr Gibbs carrying that team. If you guys have Jahmyr Gibbs on your fantasy team, kudos, congratulations. You got fantasy points because that's what you got out of this. Detroit hanging in there in the NFC North after a tough loss of Philly last Sunday night. They get a tougher than expected win because the Giants are basically playing for nothing to lose at this point. They just fired the defensive coordinator today. But Detroit just hanging in there. They might still make the playoffs. Still lots of football to be decided, but they got a big one coming up Thanksgiving, and that opponent happens to be none other than the Green Bay Packers, who just pounded Minnesota to mere submission. The J.J. McCarthy experiment has just hit the dirt. We know this. I mean, Andrew Brandt, one of the respected beat writers in the NFL community, came out and said the Vikings aren't letting J.J. McCarthy throw. Well, they're not letting him throw because the guy can't throw. I mean, why would you want to let a guy throw who can't throw? That's the problem, because that's what happened. And Green Bay just did everything they wanted to on both sides of the ball. Micah Parsons, 2 of the 5 sacks. Of course, Jordan Love got the passing game going. At Green Bay, they're just winning games. And at the rate they're going, they might find a way to sneak up and win that division. Still plenty of the football left to be played, because the division games with these 4 teams, they're coming up, and it's going to say a lot who wins that division and gets a higher seed in the NFC. And we talk about the higher seeds in the NFC. How about the Los Angeles Rams? Right now, my opinion, the best team in the NFL, at least in the NFC. You'll probably say NFL. MVP candidate Matthew Stafford did anything and everything he wanted to. And this team looks like they're a machine right now. Good luck trying to slow this down. I mean, Tampa Bay tried everything, but Baker Mayfield got beat up. And this Rams, you talk about the offense with Matthew Stafford, with guys like Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams. This defense is beating people up. I mean, this defense is just putting the clamps on teams. They picked Sam Darnold off last week to the tune of 4 interceptions, and they did the same thing happened here. Just beating up Baker Mayfield, making life terrible for him, holding the Tampa offense to only 7 points. That should tell you what they have going on in L.A. What a way to retool yourself after you won the Super Bowl 56. Took a couple years away. Last year, gave Philly all you can handle that wild card game. You can probably say almost won it. Time just ran out on them. And they picked it up where they left off. They're just beating teams right now every single which way possible. They're building a machine. Matthew Stafford might be the favorite for the MVP at the moment. And the guy's just had a resurrection like none other. Everyone's talking about this guy not being healthy to finish a season. He's got to be the favorite to win the MVP at the moment because there's nothing more to talk about. This guy is just an absolute phenomenon, what they're doing over there in L.A. So the Rams win big. And they're probably going to win that division, although Seattle's right up on their tails. But the Rams are cooking, and not just cooking on offense, they're cooking on defense. You talk about the front with guys like Jared Verse, Byron Young, and Brad Fisk. and guys like Kobe Durant in the backfield, that defense is putting clamps on people on top of that explosive offense. This is going to be a juggernaut moving forward at the rate they're going. Good luck trying to slow this one down. And we talked about the Seahawks. They had the game under control against Tennessee, but just took the foot off the gas. That's going to change at some point. Jackson Smith-Njigba, probably the number one receiver in the NFL this year. Not saying overall, but this year. And it's just continue to add on to it. Sam Darnold rebounded nicely after looking bad against that Rams defense. But they need to do a better job finishing because they had that game under control and Tennessee darn near came back on them. But I'm sure that's going to be implored by Mike McDonald because the Seahawks have tougher games coming up. But Sam Darnold to Jackson Smith-Njigba, when that's going, this year, best quarterback to receiver duo in the NFL, as I said, this year. Not saying overall because too much to talk about, but just for this season, they're cooking. Let them cook. And which brings me to the big one that took place in Kansas City yesterday. Lots to unpack with this. You had this game under control, and you can't put this Kansas City Chiefs team away. You can expect this to happen. And that's what happened in Indianapolis yesterday. They had the early interception by Leal with the two, turned it to a touchdown. But as I said before, championship DNA. You can nitpick it any way you want. As long as you have that championship DNA, you're always going to have a chance. And that's what happened when we talk about what happened with the Chiefs yesterday. I said all you had to do was just muck it up and get a W. They did. No style points. No, nothing flashy. Nothing's going to make the highlight reels. Just find a way to put a W in the win column, and that's what they did. And the Colts, well, I'll just say this right now. I think you showed a lot in defeat. I mean, your record, a lot of people are going to nitpick it. You showed you're legit. You can hang with some of the big boys in a loss. Granted, there's work to be done because you still have Daniel Jones as your quarterback, but you showed a lot. Your defense, Lou Anarumo, you remember for his years in Cincinnati when he made life terrible for Patrick Mahomes in the Bengals-Chiefs rivalry, did the same thing here for the Colts, making things terrible for Patrick Mahomes, tough as much as possible until Mahomes buckled down and showed why he's Patrick Mahomes. The Chiefs are alive, probably the season-saving win because the schedule now starts to get a little more into their favor. But sometimes you just need to just say, heck with style points, heck with X's and O's, heck with what plays we got to run. Just go out, muck it up, and get a W. That's what the Chiefs did yesterday. It was really a hard-fought battle both ways. And Kansas City escaped, probably saved their season. And another one, this one has a lot of explaining to do. It's the Eagles with a collapse in Dallas. I picked Dallas to win the upset, but I didn't think it would be because of an Eagles collapse. But the way Dak Prescott has played against the NFC East showed again. Basically, throwing for 354. I said last week, and I said on a couple of other shows, he plays well against the NFC East, and he did it again. And the Philadelphia Eagles only scored 21 points against a bottom feeder defense, and your run game didn't go all that great. Kudos to Dallas' defense for stepping up and stopping the run game. And what a comeback from Dallas. I don't know if it's going to guide them to the playoffs because the NFC is just that darn strong. Because I said it's going to be a 10-win team that misses the playoffs like last season. But probably the biggest win of the season for Dallas, how they did it. They're 500. That offense, we talk about Dak Prescott with their two weapons, George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb. They're going to be a problem. George Pickens had some off-the-chain catches like he used to have in Pittsburgh. Had it here against Philadelphia to basically pull away for the big win for Dallas. And Dallas is, I don't know if they're going to make the playoffs. I said because of more of the conference than the team. But they're going to be a problem the rest of the way. They might just play spoiler to somebody's playoff hopes or someone's seeding hopes. Good luck trying to match up against what they have going on with that offense. That defense is still going to hold them back, as we saw time after time after time. Which leads me to what took place here yesterday. Lots to unpack in many ways possible, But let's just start with New England first. You had a chance to show the whole world what you're made of. You only managed to score 19 points against one of the worst defenses in the league. And I said 19 because the other 7 was actually 20 because the 6 was on a pick 6 on a questionable throw by Joe Flacco. And everyone was pegging you guys to actually, let me back up here. People were questioning how good you guys really were because you were basically beating bottom feeder teams. And you only did have 2 big road wins in Buffalo and Tampa Bay earlier. You had a chance to show yourself in this game. You didn't play all that great. I mean, not necessarily the greatest. I mean, Drake May came on later, but you didn't play all that great. And you had a chance to, even though you're 10-2, you had a chance to put a foot down to show the whole world we're here and just put a massive mark against the same Cincinnati Bengals defense that let the Jets score 39 on them going into a game winless. And you only managed to put 20. I said 6 of it was on a pick 6. I mean, you're still good. You're 10-2. You're still going to win the AFC East. But there's still more questions than answers. Because there were times in this game where you guys coasted and it almost cost you. Because you had to fight, you threw that pick 6 to Geno Stone early. And Drake Mays throws, something was off for a big chunk of the game. Excuse me. Now, granted, he came on better and played much better. But still, you had a chance to show that you were the other thing in the AFC at a year when the AFC's had a down year, but you sort of missed a boat on that one. You got the win. Which is expected. Virtually everybody picked you. But you didn't get it in a way that you could have told the whole world we're the team to beat in the AFC, especially the year when the AFC has flip-flopped and gone inside out and there's no real standout. Because think about this for a minute. 3 of your top teams in the AFC are Indy, Denver, and New England. No one's picking any of those to come out of the AFC. And you have 2 of the AFC favorites, the Chiefs and the Ravens, right now on the outside looking in. Granted, still a boatload of football left to be played, like 6 or 7 games apiece. But this is how flip-floppy, not just the NFL, but the AFC has been this season. But that's what we're looking at moving forward. This thing is going to be a hot mess over the next few weeks. And lots to divulge into because the AFC playoff picture has done the biggest flip-flop I never thought or anybody could imagine going into this season. Because they're the sexiest overall picks were the Chiefs, Ravens, and Bills. Look, Buffalo's a wild card, and right now, Baltimore's ahead in the division race. Kansas City's on the outside looking in. That should tell you right there how crazy the AFC is going into Thanksgiving week and week 13. Lots to get to on that one. But for Cincinnati, let's just say this. Everyone's pinning it on Joe Flacco. I get it. That pick 6 was just god-awful. I mean, that's a poor of a quarterback decision anybody could do. And I've never seen a decision that poor in a quarterback for a guy with a background like that. But everyone's pinning it on Flacco. He's exceeded all expectations, okay? People thought he was going to come in and be a fodder or just be someone, just a quarterback body. He's exceeded all expectations, and then some. Not his fault the team couldn't win a game because the only game they won was against Pittsburgh, but that's because of a Pittsburgh brain fart. But he did all he could. It was not his fault. The defensive side of the ball can't tackle a statue to save its life. And a lot of people pinning a lot on Joe Flacco, which I think is unjust. Yeah, he might have been the reason they lost yesterday's game, but the overall experiment was fun, especially the press conferences where this guy just knocks the press conference out of the park. Especially when we talk about sitting at the bar watching a guy eat wings, first he felt sorry for him because he was single, but then he realized he was in heaven. That's why he's the real Joe in Cincinnati, and that's why he'll forever be the real Joe in Cincinnati. You can say a lot of things about it. You say a lot about it. It doesn't matter. But that's why he's the real Joe, because he came in, was a professional, showed up, played the best he could. You can't ask more for a guy who was 40 years old in the last couple of weeks, had a thumb and a sprained AC joint because the guy's 40 years old. It was going to happen at some point. He basically just threw his arm out is what happened. but he exceeded expectations over here. And I don't know what's going to happen to him moving forward, but he'll forever be the real Joe in Cincinnati because he knew how to cut it. He did everything the right way. Not his fault. We have a fan base who conducts themselves like cowards. It's not his fault a defense can tackle to save their lives. It is not his fault that there's a coach who's a mental midget when it matters. Joe Flacco, you did all you could. Whatever happens from this point forward, Cincinnati will always love you, and you'll forever be the real Joe that came through Cincinnati. Which leads to what may happen Thursday. I'll touch on this briefly. I'll touch more on this later in the week. They're saying Joe Burrow might play. Zach Taylor said he anticipated, but he stopped short. Question I have is it going to really matter at this point? I mean, if he wants to play, let him. If he doesn't want to play, that's fine. But where are you going to go with this? I mean, if you miraculously went out and go 9-8, where's that going to get you? I mean, you're not going to win the division because Baltimore and Pittsburgh have easier schedules. And not to mention, you have the Bengals still have to finish that gauntlet. We have to play the Ravens twice and go to Buffalo. And they have Cleveland in the season finale, and the Bengals lucked out getting a 1-point win against Cleveland. If you want to play him, have at it. Just pray nothing happens, because it would be the biggest embarrassment that any sports community would ever have when you put a $275 million investment with a turf toe with torn ligaments onto the field and something happens. Just hope it doesn't, because who knows where that's going to lead to. Just whatever they do it and stick to it. So he's not an impact player, hasn't been one in over 4 years, because you guys say he was 2-0. Your 2 wins were by a combined 2 points. Actually, your 3 wins this season for the Cincinnati Bengals have been by a combined 4 points. What is that saying about you guys at the end of the day? And don't make any excuses for it. As Bill Parcells says, you are what your record says you are. Losers make excuses and point fingers at players and coaches. That's what we have with the cowardice with the Bengals fans and the Cincinnati media, because they neglect to see their 3 wins have been by a combined 4 points, and that's not going to get you anywhere in today's league. And I don't want to hear about injuries, excuses, because he's not the only one that went through an injury. Every team goes through it. Just cut the excuses. I'll touch on that later this week. And, of course, what took place earlier today, which stemmed from taking place last week in Pittsburgh, is the fake apology by Ja'Marr Chase. It's one of the most fake apologies you could ever come up with, because all the guy did was use ChatGPT to help him out. Anybody with a brain knows this. And, of course, the Bengals fans and the Cincinnati media try to spin it off every single which way possible. He says he apologized to everyone but Jalen Ramsey. I think that part is mute, because I don't think the guy's sincerely apologetic. He's just putting something out there just because. But think about this timeline for a second. He spits on Jalen Ramsey, comes out and lies about it, and a 4K video by someone from Fox 19 on 4K shows it that he did it. Declines to speak to the media the next day. Has this a 1-game suspension. Has this weird excuse for an appeal, which goes to Jordy Nelson, a one-time receiver for the Packers. That's denied. So he's sitting, has to cough up $500,000, comes back, makes his apology through the use of ChatGPT, and people are, the cowards known as the Bengals fans and the Cincinnati media, are so gullible they're buying into it. But now let me tell you this. A video surfaced during the game yesterday where these same Bengals fans who endorsed Ja'Marr Chase spitting on a man are fighting a Patriots fan who is cheering a T. Higgins injury. There's no a play where he hit his head hard. Hopefully he's okay. But the cowardice, the bigotry, the slandering, and now the hypocrisy of Bengals fans have come out in a span of 8 days. And as I said last week, once that mask comes off, it's forever off. And that's what happened during this the span of 8 days. First, from endorsing Ja'Marr Chase spitting on Jalen Ramsey, to getting into a fight with a Patriots fan because he apparently was cheering the injury of T. Higgins when he hit his head on the turf in Cincinnati. There's your hypocrisy. There's your cowardice of Bengals fans in a nutshell. That's all you need to know about that. It was bad enough they showed their cowardice. It's bad enough they slander. It's bad enough they showed their bigotry like it took place Saturday night at Nippert Stadium. I'll touch on that in a second. But now you show your hypocrisy by attacking a fan in the stands who was cheering an injury. These same fans who was cheering a man spitting on another man. Congratulations. You want to talk about talking both sides out of your backside? You just did that when it comes to the Bengals fans and the Cincinnati media in one of the most disgusting and despicable ways you can possibly do. I get it. That's who you are. But as I said, you're not going to change your stripes. You guys just revealed your stripes over the last 8 days. And as a Steelers fan posted on one of these X platforms who follows me, and I'll just paraphrase him. You took the mask off. You are who you are at the end of the day. And I'm not, first of all, I'm not buying this Chat GPT apology that was AI generated because it was an act of cowardice. And we have bigger cowards in Cincinnati, especially the Bengals fans and the Cincinnati media, who think it's a genuine apology when it isn't. It speaks to their cowardice. And it's the same fan base who not only shows their cowardice by endorsing Jamar Chase spinning on Jalen Ramsey, but also assault a fan in the stands who was cheering a Chi Higgins injury. You want to talk about taking the mask off and going all over the place? I mean, you're even a bigger hot mess than the Hindenburg when it blew up once upon a time. That's to tell you how bad of a mess the Cincinnati Bengals fans and the Cincinnati media are. And as I said before, it's their cowardice, it's their bigotry, it is their hypocrisy. And as I said, you went into that hole. You might as well stay in that hole and not come out, because you're going to get it from every angle, from every fan base imaginable. Once that mask is ripped off, the party is over. That Chat GPT apology is just easily to be disqualified, easy to be shot down. And the cowards known as Bengals fans think that was genuine. Says a lot about them and their hypocrisy and their cowardice and their bigotry when it comes to this particular situation. And not to mention, they think this guy is in the conversation as Antonio Brown, Jerry Rice, Randy Moss, or Calvin Johnson, among many others. You know those guys have all pros. And of course, in the case of Jerry Rice, he's the goat of all goats. Forget trying to catch him. Don't act like this guy, after he spit on a man, he's now in that conversation, because those guys didn't spit on another man. Yes, Antonio Brown ran off the rails after Vontaze Burfict hit him upside the head, but that's a whole different story. Before that, 5-time All-Pro. You guys think this guy is in the same conversation as Jerry Rice? By the time Jerry Rice got to Jamar Chase's age, he was a 2-time Super Bowl winner and a Super Bowl MVP. Congratulations. Not only your cowardice show, but your hypocrisy shows and your idiocy shows. And that's why that conversations you have about putting Jamar Chase with all of those receivers makes you guys look like idiots. That doesn't make you guys look like idiots. It makes you guys idiots. I shouldn't say look like, because I'm actually giving you guys a pass. I'm not. So the Chat GPT apology is absolutely bogus. The same Bengals fan base who were fine with Jamar Chase spitting on Jalen Ramsey assaults a Patriots fan because he was cheering a T. Higgins injury, which shows their hypocrisy. And not to mention, they think because Jamar Chase spit on a man, he belongs in the same conversation as Jerry Rice or Randy Moss or Calvin Johnson or even Antonio Brown or even an AJ Green, who Jamar Chase can't carry AJ Green's jockstrap. Anybody with a brain knows that. Conversation's over on that one. Not only are they cowards, are they hypocrites? Come on. You're trying to tell me you're okay with your own spitting on another man, but you want to assault another fan for cheering an injury of your own? Congratulations. You saw the firsthand how the rest of the NFL world acted when you guys were fine spitting on another man. End of story. And speaking of laying an egg, FC Cincinnati, what the hell happened? That was a quit job last night. That was a quit job. You quit against Inter Miami. I told you all, play the game of your lives. I told Pat Noonan to coach a game of his lives. They quit. There's another way to show it. They quit. And it's disappointing. Did I expect to win? No, because that Inter Miami team is just going to win the whole thing. But to quit the way you did is an embarrassment. Shame on you. because there are guys on that team. I mean, you work so hard to get that second spot out east and basically get in a point of the supporter shield, and you finally got over the hell is real hump or whatever the frick they want to call it, only to quit against Inter Miami, and that is an embarrassment. A terrible, terrible embarrassment. I don't know. Excuse me. I don't know how to explain that one. What's going to happen moving forward? I don't know how you rebound from this. You guys say you lack the energy? No, you guys just quit on your feet. That's what happened. Because when Miami came on, they came on and punched it down your throat, and went 6 feet deep into your throat and just delivered the goods and just pounded you into submission, because that's what happened last night at TQL. I do everything I can to back you guys, but when something like that happens, I'm sorry, I have to call it like it is. Y'all quit. Y'all quit against Miami last night. And it was embarrassment, and it was humiliation. No other way to describe it. And I don't know how you guys go into off-season training camp, going into the 2026 season after a quit job like that. Just embarrassing. And one last thing before I go into boxing, this needs to be brought up because some of those cowards called Bengals fans, Saturday night was at Nippert Stadium spitting out bigoted comments directed at the players of Brigham Young, BYU, from Utah. I think everybody knows the whole Mormon shebang. I'm not going to talk about it. And then, of course, the UC president has another ChatGPT type apology. You know, this university donated a bunch of good stuff to you guys to help you guys out. And for all you guys, for you Cincinnati fans who were at Nippert Stadium Saturday night to chant a bigotry type chant the way you guys did, your true colors came out. As I said, the masks were off. The masks were off because these were the same ones who were fine with Jamar Chase spitting on Jalen Ramsey. These were the same fans who Saturday night went into Nippert Stadium and chanted that bigoted chant across Nippert Stadium. And how do I know? Don't try to hide it. Not only is it across the social media platforms, I was down the road and I heard it. How the hell are you going to chant that kind of a bigoted chant throughout a stadium? Throughout a stadium. It's not just parts. It was throughout the stadium. You chanted that particular chant in one of the most despicable acts ever. And I'm sorry is not going to cut it. You can say I'm sorry 20 times, 25 times, 30 times. It's not going to cut it. Because you just took the masks off and you reveal your true colors at the end of the day. I'm not going to repeat the chant because it involves defamatory and expletives. You guys can Google it. It's one of the most bigoted things I've ever seen. And I thought, and many of them are Bengals fans, and this should tell you the story of how they were over there that night at Nippert Stadium. And don't try to dodge it. I was down the street from it, and I heard you far away. You're not going to fool me. Lie all you want. I don't care. Try it. I heard it. My 2 ears heard it. I said, got a problem? I'm not a hard guy to find. Bring it to my face. You guys were fine. The same city fans that were fine with Jamar Chase spitting on Jalen Ramsey. Same fans that taunted this bigoted chant at Brigham Young's players. And I'll let you guys hear that for yourself. And assaulted a Patriots fan who was cheering T. Higgins' injury. Cowardice, bigoted, hypocrites. End of conversation. As I said, you're in that hole. Stay in that hole. Don't ever come out. Hopefully someone buries you in that hole and you guys are staying there forever. End of conversation. Now to the world of boxing. Saturday night, Bam Rodriguez. Jesse Bam Rodriguez, the third best fighter in the world behind Alexander Usyk and Naoya Inoue, showed why he was worthy of that distinction by beating up the fake champion Fernando Martinez. It is basically a clinic, a punch volume, punch efficiency clinic, where the guy was landing around 40% of his punches. I mean, when he threw, he didn't miss. And when he landed, he did damage, especially the punch that put Martinez down and out for the count and put him out of his misery for good. They say guys are right when you rise and you rise fast. Right now, that's Jesse Bam Rodriguez, probably the premier, one of the top two fighters south of the lightweight division, not next to Naoya Inoue. And this guy is the goods. I mean, you're talking about wanting to fight Inoue or Natakani at some point. I get it. But stay how you are right now. Go undisputed, because if you go undisputed, you're really going to jump up the echelon. I mean, right now, I said number 3 behind Usyk at number 1, Inoue at number 2. This guy's a sensation, just wiping out anyone they put in front of him. Actually, this is supposed to be one of the tougher opponents for Jesse Rodriguez. Effortless, just like the opponent before, who basically fought a survival fight, and Rodriguez just gradually broke him down before he stopped him. Jesse Bam Rodriguez is a problem in those weight classes. I'm not ready to put him in an Inoue just yet. So no, Inoue's probably flattened out. Maybe he gets a downturn because he's going to be at some point at that age. But I still would favor Inoue over Rodriguez. Give it another year or two. Maybe that changes. But if I'm Jesse Bam Rodriguez, you are the 3rd best fighter in the world pound for pound, behind Alexander Usyk, behind Naoya Inoue. Go undisputed in your weight class. Clean that out, and then seek bigger and better goals. Because you're the man right now in that weight class. You were the fighter of the night, Saturday night, on that so-called stacked card over the Riyadh season, whatever the frick they have going on over there. You're the man. You are the champion. No one can take it away from you. You showed what you were when you just beat down Juan Estrada once upon a time. Just keep doing what you're doing. Your time is coming, and it's coming sooner than you think. Go undisputed in that weight class first before you do anything else. So number 3 behind Usyk and Inoue. Hard to dispute him at this point. Again, I don't want to speculate what he's going to do forward. I can understand the Inoue fight because him and Inoue would sell massive money abroad if they want to go that far, because Rodriguez has become a hit sensation and it's basically catch on the casual fan of the boxing public. And if you're going to fight a guy like Inoue, Naoya Inoue, who we know is a global phenomenon, top 2 pound for pound with Alexander Usyk, that's going to be a big hit. Let the thing marinate just a little bit more. But while that's going on, Jesse Bam Rodriguez should go undisputed in his division. That's all has to be said. The guy is just phenomenal. He's a case of a fighter as a champion. I can't say this much. As a champion, has found ways to be better as a champion. I haven't seen something like that in quite some time. We talk about a guy like him. I mean, Usyk and Inoue are both also, that's what makes them the top 3 fighters in the world. Because when they're champions, they find a way to be better as champions. And they're staying active, and that's why they're better as champions. And that's why Jesse Bam Rodriguez has become the sensation that he is. And he's just going to wipe out anyone that stands in front of him in that weight class. Yeah, he's probably going to have to move up at some point because the competition is wearing out. But find that final champion, beat him, go undisputed, and then move up. The good news is a sensation. For your fight followers, if this guy's not your top 3, I ain't talking to you. I mean, if your top 3 isn't Usyk, Inoue, and Rodriguez, I ain't talking to you because you have no credibility. Now to the positive aspect of the history of the night. This one took place 50 years ago at the Inglewood, California Great Western Forum, the home of the old Lakers dynasty. A phenom was introduced from the country of Nicaragua. His name was Alexis Arguello against Ruben Olivares, the 4-time world champion 2-weight divisions. We talk about action fighters for that time. Ruben Olivares was that. And remind you, he had a distinction of the greatest Mexican fighter of all time before he introduced to guys like Salvador Sanchez, Julio Cesar Chavez, Marco Antonio Barrera, and the list goes on. He fights his phenom named Alexis Arguello in a defense of his featherweight championship. And we talk about what took place on this night. Question was going in is how Arguello was going to handle the pressure of Olivares. And we talk about the case of pure brilliance versus a guy that likes to mix it up. That's what we had here. Styles clashed, and we had a Fight of the Year candidate in 1974 because these two guys went at it. And it looked like for a minute Olivares was going to win this fight because in the middle rounds, he started to hurt Alexis Arguello, even by Arguello's admission, saying, in the middle of the late rounds, everything he hit me with, I was hurting. And Ruben Olivares, as good of an action fighter as there is, delivered the action. And Alexis Arguello, as I've said before, one of the premier sharpshooters south of the middleweight division. When he threw, he landed. And when he landed, he did damage. And that's what we had 51 years ago at the Great Western Forum in Inglewood, California, when Arguello and Olivares tangled up. As the fight was going on, as Olivares was starting to slow down, Arguello, sharpshooting, started to take over. And it was that 13th round where it was that half hook, half uppercut, which has been the Arguello staple throughout his career, that put Olivares down, had him hurt. But Olivares beat the count. Arguello pummeled him down to the canvas again, and it was stopped. And a phenom was introduced south of the lightweight division when Alexis Arguello won the first of his 3 world titles in his coming out party, dismantling the all-time great warrior, Ruben Olivares, to win the featherweight championship. What made Alexis Arguello just a sensational hit? And it's not true for a lot of these Latino fighters, but maybe he's a perfect example of this. A guy who can fight many ways, but we talk about economy of punches, which is something we don't see much. Alexis Arguello mastered it. Because when he hit you, he didn't miss. And what he hit you with, he was doing damage. We talk about the left uppercut that, sent Olivares down in the 13th round in a fight where Olivares was doing everything to him, especially hurting him in the middle of the late rounds by Alexis's admission. But Arguello just came on, and just stopped and beat Olivares, one of the real warriors of the all-time great Mexican fighters, probably top 5 in that category. But we talk about coming out parties, maybe that weight class, the one that really stood out the most was none other than Ruben Olivares out of Mexico City. And really for before this fight, 4 world titles in 2 weight classes at a time when winning multiple world titles meant something. I mean, not only won multiple world titles, he went undisputed twice at bantamweight. If I'm correct, I think he's the only one that did it. We think about beating Chuco Castillo, and of course, regaining the championship from him. Back up. After losing the title to Castillo, he won it back. Earlier in his career, he beat Lionel Rose to win the titles as a vacant title. Moves up to featherweight. Has some standout wins there. We talk about guys like Bobby Chacon, Carlos Mendoza, Shinsuke Utagawa, and of course, had this terrific fight with Alexis Arguello. One of the more exciting Mexican fighters. And we talk about excitement, he brought it. And there's nothing more you can say about him because he brought it here on this night. And he made Alexis Arguello had to go to the well because of it. And because he did, that's why everything happened that night the way it did. But Olivares, basically, you could probably say this was the end for him. He did manage to win a title from Bobby Chacon, one of the more exciting fighters, and really one of those Mexican bloodbaths, because that's what Chacon Olivares was. But it's probably his last finest hour. Lost to David Cote. Eventually, at the back end of the 70s, tried one more shot at the title. Lost to the standout Eusebio Pedroza. But when you talk about some of the all-time great Mexican fighters, and there's a whole ton of them, and you talk about the Latino community, his name sometimes gets overlooked. He's definitely a top 5 all-time great Mexican fighter, and definitely a top 10 all-time great Latino fighter. 4 times world champion in 2 weight classes. Twice went undisputed in the bantamweight division, which I'm correct. No one's ever done that. That should tell you the legacy that he left in the Mexican community. We talk about the great Ruben Olivares, just a standout fighter who brought action all the time. And we talked about Alexis Arguello, some of the wins he's had in his career. I mean, his resume is stacked. I mean, what can you say? I mean, Bazooka Limon, Cornelius Boza Edwards. I mentioned Olivares, Bobby Chacon, twice over Alfredo Escalera. Of course, the big hit when he came to the States and beat the American superstar Ray Boom Boom Mancini, which put him to a higher level. Of course, a one-punch obliteration of Kevin Rooney out of nowhere. And of course, a standout over Andy Ganigan with a supposed to be a tougher than expected fight. Alexis Arguello dusted him off. One of the most successful little giants and a top 5 all-time great Latino fighter a thing of beauty. We talk about the pure elegance of the sweet science and a fighter who embodied it to mere perfection the way Alexis Arguello did. And the guy was just a thing of beauty every time he fought. Not the way he fought in the ring, but how he carried himself outside the ring. The guy was his first class, as they would say, class personified. That's what Alexis Arguello was. And it was 51 years ago today at the Inglewood, California Great Western Forum. It was Alexis Arguello's coming out party against the tough, durable, all-time great Ruben Olivares. And it was Arguello coming from behind with a left hook of perfection that floored Olivares and won him the first of his 3 world titles, becoming the world featherweight champion. Just a sensational fight between 2 ultra elite all-time great featherweights at that time and 2 of the great Latino fighters to ever step foot in the ring. These 2 guys set the example. They embodied everything what Latino boxing was and embodied everything that the sweet science was. Kudos to both. And I conclude, for every positive thing in the sport of boxing, there's always a negative. And this one has to be brought up because a lot of light was shed, but for the wrong reasons. This took place 24 years ago on ESPN2's Friday Night Fights. It was a fight between the Harlem Hammer Butler versus Richard Grant. This is a rematch of a fight that Grant won the first time. And in this fight, James Butler was starting to climb up the rankings in the super middleweight division. Gets Richard Grant in a fight in New York City, which is supposed to be to benefit the firefighters and all the law enforcement of 9/11. Everybody knows the story of that one. But the real story is probably the most flagrant, cowardly act you could ever conduct in the boxing ring took place. After Richard Grant won the decision, the rightful winner, because James Butler couldn't even touch the guy. And when Richard Grant would reach to shake the hand of James Butler, a loaded fist, already hand wrapped by James Butler, sucker punched Richard Grant, and Richard Grant was down, basically almost schizophrenic, like with his jaw turned sideways, in one of the most despicable, cowardly acts after the fight that you could ever see. You had 10 rounds to do something to this guy, and you didn't, but you sucker punched the guy in a cheap, cowardly way after you was announced the loser. That's what James Butler did. As we know, as always, chaos ensued. The security pinned James Butler into that corner, and Richard Grant was still on the ground, almost shaking after that punch, and a sucker punch it almost sounded like a firecracker that hit him. And the respected pundits who were at that fight said you could hear Bob Papa and Teddy Atlas, who called the fight on ESPN2, screaming for this guy to be thrown out of the sport. And that's essentially, that didn't happen, but he did on his own recognizance, which I'll touch on in a second, because he was charged with second-degree assault with this particular incident and was able to come back eventually, being James Butler, but lost every fight afterward. But the story here with him was how he had wound up into a massive mental implosion by basically killing Sam Killerman, the brother of well-respected boxing analyst Max Killerman. We have scumbags in the sport, always have it, always will. That's one of the reasons why I got out years back. Because when these 2 I saw some of the things that gone on, that's why I left. This was the epitome of some of the things I saw, but not quite to this level. What James Butler did to Richard Grant makes the Mike Tyson ear bite on Evander Holyfield in 1997 look like child's play, because it's nothing compared to what took place on this night in New York City. It's supposed to be a charity event of fun to help the firefighters from 9/11, which we know what the story with that one is. But in one of the most cowardly and flagrant foul acts you'll ever see in the sport, James Butler, after the fight, sucker punches Richard Grant unnecessarily when Richard Grant was trying to congratulate James Butler on a good fight despite getting the win. Left Grant in a schizophrenic position, had Butler basically pinned in the corner, security escorting him, where he essentially was arrested on the spot. And Richard Grant wound up with stitches on his tongue, and a jaw that was, if I'm correct, dislocated. And we've seen a lot of real criminal, despicable acts in the sport. Maybe the only thing that tops what happened between James James Butler and Richard Grant was what took place with Louis Resto and Billy Collins. It was in that category in a despicable act of cowardice. You lost a fight. And there's no way you describe it. You lost a fight fair and square because Richard Grant did anything and everything he wanted to do to you. And you resort to a sucker punch after the fight, just even after even 10 rounds to try to hit the guy and you couldn't. That shows who you are at the end of the day. And we know James Butler is still serving time in a California prison for what he did to Sam Kellerman, and hopefully he stays there. And everyone's trying to use boxing or supposedly his diagnosis of some form of manic depressive disorder as a way out of it. Judge ruled that he could stand trial, which he did. Eventually accepted a guilty plea of arson and second-degree manslaughter, which garnered him this 29-year sentence. But something needs to be said. And we talk about some of this in the NFL with CTE. I get it. But some of this also needs to be talked about in the fight game with some of these guys resorting to the cowardly acts in and out of the ring and what goes on. And sometimes, I've said this with the characters, we've had unique characters, good, bad, pretty, ugly in the sport of boxing. I mean, whatever you want to call it, you call it. I mean, we had Tony Ayala Jr. for what he did in the early 80s. We had Panama Lewis for what he did with Louis Resto in the corner prior to the Billy Collins fight. And now we have this. And there's a whole bunch of others in the middle I could point to. I mean, crooked judging, rigged rating systems are nothing compared to what took place 24 years ago. And maybe as they do this research for other sports, we talk about mental illness and CTE, maybe it might be time to do some of this because we're a few years removed from what Felix Varejao, a one-time standout out of Puerto Rico, did to a pregnant woman, and now he's serving life. And of course, there's the odd story of Edwin Valero, which I'm not even going to try and get into it because it's an odd story and it's just weird. Maybe we need to find something in regards to what goes on in the fighter's mind, just as much as we do in the NFL with all of that that's going on. We talk about, concussions, CTE, etc. Because that's not brought up enough. For James Butler to resort to sucker punching an individual after a fight, he lost and lost clearly, to doing what he did to Sam Kellerman shortly after, speaks volumes. And whether that's a bipolar disorder, manic depressive disorder, or getting his brains bashed up a few times in that ring, or whatever, some of these behaviors need to be looked at seriously. Because we're having the same thing, of course, in the NFL last few years with Antonio Brown. And of course, now Brown is supposedly indicted on attempted murder charges. Might be time to look at the same sort of thing in the fight game for some of the fighters outside of the ring, because the behaviors on some of those in and out of the ring, especially when I talk about guys like James Butler, who's a poster child of this, raises eyebrows and raises questions. Just a criminal, disgusting act. I mean, you had 10 rounds to do something with this guy. You had 10 rounds. You couldn't do anything with him. But the first chance you get after the fight, you pull that act off. And when credible people like Bob Papa and Teddy Atlas say you should be thrown out of the sport and your actions validated, you can put 2 and 2 together, and I'm sure you can come up with a real answer. Because that's what happened there. Richard Grant never got close to that level ever again. It stayed as an ESPN2 fighter. But we've had all of this. I mean, it might be time for some serious conversations about fighter behaviors outside the ring, just like there is when we talk about NFL players and what they go through, CTE, concussions, yada, yada. Of course, Antonio Brown being the perfect example of it. When you resort to this kind of a downward spiral after what took place in the ring. And what you did on this night, what James Butler did to Richard Grant, and have it spin off the way you did, makes you wonder, what is the thought process? I mean, we can call him the scum of the earth. I mean, he basically validated that. Did he do it purposefully, or he did? But there's some other behaviors of some fighters that need seriously looked at. Because when that stuff, I always say about stuff that comes outside of the ring, in the ring. But the same can be said in transverse. If it goes from in the ring to outside and you're conducting this yourself in this way, questions need to be answered and research need to be done. Of course, they tried the same thing years back with Riddick Bowe after the 2 losses with Andrew Galata. And all the physicians basically said after the fight, chronic brain injury. Mildred Taylor, after his loss to Julio Cesar Chavez, same thing. And we know sometimes the chronic brain injury gives you a different mindset and your brain now starts to act different. And of course, we see that. I talk about the NFL, maybe some other type of combat sports need looked at. Maybe the same with boxing, because of quite a few guys I've been around, you can almost sense something is not right. And that needs to be looked at as hard as the NFL or people looking at with CTE in the NFL. Think of what happened 24 years ago in New York. It was just only as basically a charity event to help out 9/11, and it was marred by a disgusting act. Something was not right with James Butler. That's why he's sitting where he's at. And probably the best thing is he sits there and just makes himself irrelevant, because that's who he is at the end of the day. And I've said this with Bengals fans. I say the same with James Butler, because they're the same type. You take that mask off, it's over. It's over. But there's something deeper that needs to be looked at as to why it gets to that point, why the mindset acts the way it does. That simple. Sometimes I have to bring this up because for every positive in our sport, there's always a negative. And the only thing worse than this was probably the Louis Resto, Billy Collins fiasco of assault in the ring. I mean, not even the Mike Tyson, Evander Holyfield ear bite scenario compares with these two. That's child's play. Basically, Tyson Holyfield ear bite was a fighter that's basically saying, I can't beat this guy. I'm getting the hell out. The Resto Collins and Butler-Grant go deeper and deeper physically, mentally, and spiritually. It makes you wonder at the end of the day who was doing what and why they were thinking the way they did. Plain and simple. And on that note, that'll wrap up this edition of Sirhan on X. Tomorrow night, an earlier start. An event defined in 2 words. And the 2 words just ring across the sports and pop culture landscape like none other. It rang out of the mouth of the loser. But I'll point out why the winner felt slighted as a loser. It's summed up in 2 words. I'm sure you guys can figure that out in the fight game. And as always, if you missed any part of this show, you can catch any of the other shows on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. And as always, make self-care your number 1 priority in all walks of life. Always take care of yourself first before you take care of anything else. Focus on you. Take care of you. Respect boundaries, which is something Jamar Chase doesn't do. All the good things will come. If you don't, nothing else matters. Have a good rest of the night. Take care of yourselves. God bless, and enjoy the evening.